Hey guys, it's Miss Thurston, and I wanted to go ahead and do what I promised and make a video for you to help you wrap up your poetry reading and analyzing project or packet, I should say, that is due very soon. And if you take a look in Google Classroom, I have extended the deadline. Your packet is due this coming Monday, Memorial Day. Um, I'm giving you the weekend. It is due Monday, May 25th. Um, so you do have the weekend to go ahead and finish this up. Again, this uh, pack Again, this video is voluntary. It is just a help to you to finish up that last poem because there were 5 poems. We only met for 4 days, and I was really leaving the last poem to you based on the work that we did. Well, we kind of rushed through those 4 poems. So, as a bonus, I am going over poem 4 again, the Robert Frost poem. Surprise! And I'm going to go over poem 5, the abandoned farmhouse. So if you stick with me, I'm going to go over and get you started on both of those poems again and give you hopefully a jump start to help you finish this major grade. And hopefully you can get your grade that little goose that it needs to finish up this fourth 9 weeks on a really strong note. So here's Robert Frost's poem. And remember, Robert Frost is one of our great American literary treasures. And he wrote so many famous poems and short stories that we kind of hold him to a very high standard. And his poetry is filled with so many beautiful images and such deep levels of meaning that for the first time you read them, or maybe even the second or third time, you almost have to close your eyes and listen to the words and let yourself be transported to where he wants to take you in order to really get the deeper meaning of what he wants you to get in your soul. So, like I had you do in class, I want you just to listen for a second. Close your eyes and listen to the words. Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down today. Nothing gold can stay. Now read the poem through a second time to yourself and ask yourself, what does Robert Frost mean by this? Well, as we're looking through, I know that gold is rare and precious, and it's highly valued. Think about it. When you see somebody with lots of gold chains or jewelry or things like that, you think, wow, either somebody really likes them or they're really rich. But if nothing gold can stay, that means these precious things don't last forever. Like we talked about in class, the title means that nothing lasts forever. Well, what do they mean by nothing? What is the nothing that they're trying to say lasts forever? Well, think back to Robert Frost's poem. He talks about nature, the green, dawn. Dawn, Eden, all those things are often used in literature as symbols of life. So, Robert Frost isn't talking about nature itself in this poem. He's also talking about life in general. And think about it. He's talking about leaf going to leaf, dawn to a new day, and gold and nature's gold not staying. So, just like we discussed in class, it still holds true. The situation that Robert Frost is describing is that nature and life itself, because of what he uses in his poem, symbolizes nature and life is always changing, and it changes quickly. Now, I can't do this one for you. What are your first impressions of the poem? Be honest with me. If you didn't like the poem, you don't like the poem. If you didn't get it at first, tell me that. But if you got it the second or the third time you read it, go ahead and tell me that. So, what are your first impressions of the poem? What did you initially think that Robert Frost was talking about? Now, take a look at the second part of our poem. What is the message of the poem? And remember, message is the same thing as theme. What is the life lesson or message about human nature that Robert Frost would like us to learn or get a picture of? Well, Robert Frost is really kind of saying, look back at what you said in part 1 about change. Change cannot be avoided, or change is inevitable. And my pen is just being so wonderful. Change is inevitable. You can't avoid change. Just like we talked about in class, fall will change to winter, winter will change to spring, spring will change to summer. The seasons will always come. And yes, we should hold spring's first green, that nature's first green, very precious, but it's not going to stay. That first green is inevitably going to give away to summer. So, what word choices can help bring Frost's subjects to life? Think about what he said, only stay an hour. Is one. Can you find one more that helps back up his change is inevitable? I bet you can. How about 2? There's 2 more phrases that can help you back up that change is inevitable. Now, we've all done our rhyme scheme with the letters. You can do that on your own, just like find an example of alliteration. But you have to remember what alliteration is. Alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds. It's within that poem, but remember, it's the consonant sounds, not just the letter. And it has to be at the start of each of the words, not contained within the word. That's consonants. So please, alliteration needs to be at the beginning of the word. Look very carefully. And by the way, there's more than one example. So there's multiple examples for number 4. I think you got this. Next, we're going to look at the metaphors presented in Robert Frost's poem. And we talked about the first one in class. Nature's first green is gold. You need to ask yourself 2 things. 1, what 2 things are being compared? And 2, what does it mean? Why is he comparing those 2 things? And what deeper meaning is he trying to show by comparing those 2 things? Again, it's not enough just to identify the metaphor anymore. As 7th graders, we have to be able to give the bigger meaning behind the metaphor. And we used number 1 as an example. Nature's first green is gold. We said nature's first green is talking about spring. We said that nature's first green is talking about spring, or the season of spring. And yes, spring does come up, and it is very valuable. So if spring's first green is being compared to gold and something valuable, we need to get behind the bigger meaning of that. What it's saying here is that because gold is a symbol of something valuable, when spring arrives and there is new growth, it is so precious. Did you write that here in this text box? I'll say it again because I'm not writing it out for you. Gold is something precious and valuable. So when spring's first green arrives, it is considered something very valuable and precious. Take a look at the second metaphor. I'm leaving number 3 to you to do completely on your own. See, by watching the video, you got a little extra help. Her hardest hue to hold. Her hardest hue. Who is her? Well, since this line came right after nature's first green is gold, wouldn't her naturally refer to spring? So we know that we're talking about spring. Spring's first hue. Well, I know hue is a color. So what they're talking about is spring's first green is the hardest to hold. So the first green, or the first growth of spring, is the hardest to hold onto or to appreciate because it goes away the fastest. I'll say it again. Spring's first green is the hardest to hold on to because not only is it the most precious, but it goes away the fastest. Wow. Robert Frost packed a lot of meaning into just a few little words. I don't have that kind of writing talent. Do you? So now it's your turn to do, and that is a horrible arrow. Don't tell anybody I did that. And I was on a roll too. Now it is your turn to do number 3. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Wow. It's almost as if he's repeating the same metaphor. That's about all the hint I'm giving you. So what then? What do I do next? Well, now you've got to bring it all together there. Take what you've done here in metaphor analysis, take what you've done in part 2 and write me a wonderful little paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences, that talks about the theme of Robert Frost's poem. If the theme is life changes quickly and change is inevitable, how did he convey that through his metaphors? How did he use, what sort of language did he use? All the information is there. You did it in parts 2 and 3. You just have to put it into sentences in the paragraph under analysis. I know you can do it. I'm a little upset that I had not discovered this author before I started gathering these materials for you guys. Ted Kooser writes a fantastic poem that is a cross between kind of this spine chiller whodunit and just this sad kind of creepy poem, depending on how you look at it. And it really touched my heart that in such a way that I don't know about y'all after you read this, but I just felt it very sad and just heartbreaking. So after we read this together, I hope that you see that he was really trying to paint this very vivid picture. And we'll talk about what picture he was trying to paint and really dive deep into these 3 different stanzas. Abandoned Farmhouse by Ted Kooser. He was a big man, says the size of his shoes, on a pile of broken dishes by the house. A tall man, too, says the length of the bed in an upstairs room. And a good, God-fearing man, says the Bible, with a broken back on the floor below the window, dusty with sun. But not a man for farming, says the fields, cluttered with boulders, and the leaky barn. A woman lived with him, says the bedroom wall, papered with lilacs, and the kitchen shelves covered with oilcloth. And they had a child, says the sandbox made from a tractor tire. Money was scarce, say the jars of plum preserves, and canned tomatoes sealed in the cellar hole. And the winter's cold, say the rags in the window frames. It was lonely here, says the narrow country road. Something went wrong, says the empty house in the weed-choked yard. Stones in the fields say he was not a farmer. The still-sealed jars in the cellar say she left in a nervous haste. And the child? Its toys are strewn in the yard like branches after a storm. A rubber cow, a rusty tractor with a broken plow, a doll in overalls. Something went wrong, they say. Doesn't that send chills down your spine? Something went wrong, they say. That last line, look at it again. Did you pick up on the ton of personification that is in this poem? That all of the objects in this scene that he paints are conveying a message, are telling a story. Did you pick up on the story that this poem is trying to tell? Did you pick up on the story that these objects and this scene is trying to get you to see in your mind? Can you see the story? If you can't see the story, I want you to pause the video and I want you to read the poem again. Or if nothing else, go back and rewind the video and listen to the words again while closing your eyes, just like we did with Robert Frost's poem. And I want you to see if you can picture it in your mind. Can you see the leaky barn? Can you see the farm fields? Can you see the toys in the sandbox? Can you see the kitchen and the dust and the cobwebs that have gathered? Can you see it? Now that we have read the poem and read it maybe 2 or 3 times, it's now time to break it down step by step. And we want to write down details of the characters in this story. And not just the characters in this story, they also want us to write down some details of the farm and the farmhouse. Because again, Ted Kooser paints such a vivid picture of each of these 4 things, of each of the 3 characters of the family and the place in which they lived. So the directions ask us to write down 3 details from the poem that tell you something about each of these things below. So find 3 things about the man, 3 things about the child, 3 things about the woman, and of course 3 things about the farm and the farmhouse itself. And so not just characteristics of those people, but also items associated with them. So please go back and do that. I'm not going to do it because I think that's easy enough that I think you guys can do that very well on your own. Look at part 2, figurative language. And what I like about this sort of graphic organizer is that it helps take one thinking part of it off of you. It gives you the definition of the terms it wants you to look at. They want you to find an example of personification, a simile, and alliteration. Guys, it reminds you of each of those terms, and if you don't remember exactly what those terms are and you need more examples, you have those in your poetry notes that we took now going on 2 weeks ago. So again, I am not going to help you with this part of it because I think this part is easy enough that you should be able to very much find this on your own. This is the kind of easy stuff that is the starting of that step 4 of analyzing poetry, of the annotation. So now that we've gotten some of those little things out of the way, we now need to take Kooser's words and put them in our own words. Because remember we talked about those levels of understanding, and one of the higher levels of understanding is, are we able to take a text and put it into our own words? And if we have that ability, we are able to demonstrate one of the higher levels of understanding. So that's what we're being asked to do now. And I'm going to do the first one with you to show you kind of what we want and to show you that it's not really that hard. And then you're going to do the next 2 on your own. So let's take our text, and I want to just kind of talk about what exactly are they wanting me to do? Well, they want me to talk about the man itself. Well, I know he was a big man and he was tall and that he lived in the house. So I do need to talk about that. Well, I also know that he was a God-fearing man, and that means he was religious. And I know that he was probably very religious because look about the Bible. The Bible had a broken back. Anytime a book has a broken back, it means it was probably read a lot. But we also know that the man had his faults. He was not a man for farming because the fields were cluttered with boulders and there was a leaky barn. So I need to be able to write all of that up and put it into my own words. So I'm going to do that now. Oops. Accidentally did 2 text boxes. All right, Thurston. There we go. All right. So, the man who lived in the house was big and tall. Simple enough. He was also religious and probably read his Bible a lot. Okay? Now, we also know that he was not a good farmer. He was not a good farmer. And what do we know about his fields? His fields were not plowed because they had rocks in them. And his barn had holes in it. Holes in the roof. And that's what they mean by a leaky barn. Guys, that's it. That's all you have to do, is to put exactly what Kuzer says in your own words. Was that hard? I didn't think it was that hard. And again, like I've said before, poetry is not my thing. But as long as you can look at this and look at the big picture, it can be your thing. But one other thing I do want to do with you is I do want you, and it's not letting me zoom in. Freaks. All right. Yes, I called the paper a freak. I know it doesn't care. What happened in this farmhouse? Does the text tell us what exactly happened in the farmhouse? It doesn't tell us. That's what makes this such like a mystery or who done it. All we know about of what happened in this farmhouse is that it was sudden and tragic. So, what kind of event is Kuzer trying to portray? And I think you have already kind of caught on to that. Give me an emotion. What emotion is he trying to attach to this kind of event? Okay, guys, last page. Just like we did with the other analysis pages, it's time to bring it all together. And I want you to make this your best paragraph yet. Explain how Kuzer portrays the aftermath of a traumatic event in the poem of the farmhouse. In your paragraph, I expect you to talk about how he uses personification. How he describes the scene. It went off again. How he describes the scene using imagery. Okay. I need you to talk about the words, how what he does with the family and the objects around. So your paragraph really needs to speak. And don't forget, of course, your text evidence. Poetry is not hard, ladies and gentlemen. I know you can do it. Again, if you need something, don't forget to email me, hit me up on Remind, text me, give me a ring on that, my work number. I love and miss you all. Have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.